In the late 1980s, my friends and I were put on a little black book in Wayne, Nebraska. A mother was listing all the people that she thought were part of a satanic cult. Now, mind you, this town is only about 5,000 people at that time, but she was putting out a list of us that were satanic. It got serious enough that my local Methodist church decided to hold a satanic awareness education session. The pastor invited law enforcement, other clergy to help educate the public. The reason that I was put on this list, we were punk rockers. I know you probably can't tell now, but had spiked hair, mohawks, stuff like that. We were skateboarders. We dressed crazy, and we also played Dungeons and Dragons. So we must have been satanic. After the session, things slowly went back to normal, and everyone thought the mother was nuts. But the damage was already done. I'll come back to this a little later. This is my first new true crime for 2023. I'm a little late. I probably should have gotten this done a month ago. Life happens and you just get waylaid by it sometimes. But if you couldn't tell, for this true crime, I'm going to do it on Satanic Panic. There's a lot to say, but not much to say about it. But a lot of criminals blamed their crimes on Satan. So I thought this was kind of fitting to the true crimes area. Satanic Panic, that's a great rhyme, Satanic Panic, started in the 1980s with the release of Michelle Remembers. The book became a bestseller. It detailed a childhood spent undergoing shocking cult sexual abuse. And this is a memoir of the author's wife, Michelle Smith, who under hypnosis pulled out of some hidden memories about being abused and by members of the Church of Satan. Eventually, the book was debunked, but the damage had already been done to the population. Of course, evangelical preachers like Jerry Falwell gained popularity on our TVs and preached about Satan and how Satan was everywhere. It was all about fire and brimstone, placing fears in the population who needed something to believe in. You know, the 1980s was defined by stranger danger. And it was a growing fear of your own neighborhood, which is funny because my parents always told me never to talk to strangers. And some guy drove up to me and asked me where something was located, and I didn't know. So I told him to follow me home as I rode my bike. And I rode my bike home and had him ask my dad. My parents were furious with me because stranger danger. How dare I bring some weirdo back to the house to show him where I lived? I mean, ended up being harmless, but stranger danger. Yet another nifty word that rhymes. In 1983, Ray Bucky was accused of abusing one of his students at the Virginia McMartin preschool. And by the following summer, these accusations had grown to include hundreds of students. The rumors stated that all the children were abused in satanic rituals in tunnels underneath the school. Now, of course, there was trials, and they dug underneath the school trying to find these tunnels. No tunnels were ever found underneath the school, and it actually took from 83 to 1990 for Bucky to be acquitted of these charges. Students actually started to admit that they fabricated the stories. To this date, it is one of the longest and most expensive criminal cases that was ever tried in the United States. But even though most of these accusations and scares of satanic panic were false, it never stopped the FBI and law enforcement and the public from running wild with it. Just like what happened in my town. You know, the concept of hell and Satan has been around since humankind itself. And in the writings, of the Bible, so at least a few thousand years. But in 1969, things got changed up a little bit. Anton LaVey wrote the Satanic Bible. He created the Satanic Church, or the Church of Satan, in 1966. And in 1970, LaVey appeared in a documentary called Satanus, the Devil's Mass, which outlined what was a satanic ritual and what they were all about. This infuriated the public. This made their minds wander and start thinking about it. Other factors that helped with the rise of satanic panic were satanic rock music. Because Judas Priest and AC/DC and Black Sabbath, they're all satanic, you know that, right? Violent and fantasy video games, or just games itself like D&D. I know my friends and I never really went on a killing spree after playing Dungeons and Dragons, but who knows? It could still be working in our brains. And of course, recovered memories of sexual or child abuse and ritual sacrifice. As previously stated, this started with the book Michelle Remembers and the McMartin Preschool. But there were so many other claims. I just couldn't go through them all because it was just so numerous of the amount of claims. Those were the two most predominant, so that's the reason I stuck with them. Luckily, though, Satanic Panic only lasted about a decade, maybe 12, 13 years. It started to end, the beginning of the fall was in 1990 with the acquittal of Ray Bucky. Then in 1992, the FBI actually released a report discrediting satanic ritual abuse. Now, there has never been a recorded satanic ritual abuse murder or mass murder. Now, criminals have stated that they killed people for Satan, but it was not a satanic ritual abuse. In 1993, 2020 had an episode on how suggestible children were and how easily they accept and believe stories. So one child starts talking about how so-and-so did so-and-so, or so-and-so did something, and then the other child goes, oh yeah, so-and-so did this. And another child goes, so-and-so did this. So that's kind of what happened with Bucky. In 1994, 60 Minutes did a show on how recovered memories was normally false. Because at the mid to late 80s to early 90s, that's what everyone popped out saying, false memory, or that they recovered memories under hypnosis. Roseanne was a big one. But most of them came out and were false. It took until 2005, for one of the children from the McMartin case to come forward, and he stated that he lied about everything. But, did I say McMillan? McMartin case came forward to state that he lied about everything. Now, apparently, 15 years earlier, they already figured that out. But still, it took him that long to come forward and say, oh, no, I made that up, sorry. Which really sucks because, think of all the damage that was done during the Satanic Panic. And, it affected me, but it didn't. You'd hear the whispers, satanic, he's satanic, But when you got to the bottom of it, it really didn't affect me. Being on that list, the blacklist, it was just kind of ridiculous because I remember my pastor doing the satanic awareness thing at the church. And me and another friend went there and decided, hey, we're going to go show up here. Because we're both on the list because we're punk rockers and punk rockers are Satan. And my pastor knew that, I was kind of outspoken and cocky and couldn't keep my mouth shut. So he's like, just behave yourself. And they started going through a list of what's satanic. And they were talking about colors. And they said, children who wear all black. Well, I'm all dressed in black. But so is my preacher. And I look at him and I kind of just point at him and go, you're wearing black. And he just like nods and put his hand up like, okay. Then they said, the color red. Now, I'm from Nebraska. Go big red. That's what we chant every football day. And people have go big red on their cars, go big red shirts. And I'm sitting there going, well, go big red. So that means all of Nebraska's satanic. We like red. And of course, I said that a little bit more verbally. And people started grumbling. And my pastor's like, stop. And everything that they were saying was just ridiculous. And afterwards, this lady, and I think it was the lady that put us on the list, is like asking my pastor, why are they here? They're satanic. And he's like, why? Well, because they listen to that punk rock music. And my pastor, you see this pastor, preacher, or whatever you want to call him, all dressed up and goes, oh, you mean like the Sex Pistols? That's not satanic. She goes, how do you know? And he goes, I've listened to it. If I want to try to connect with my clergy or with the kids in my church, I've listened to things like the Sex Pistols, the Dead Kennedys. Not my cup of tea, but they're just singing about the angst of society. And she's like, well, what about Black Sabbath and Slayer and AC/DC? And he goes, oh, some of those have really good songs. He goes, but they're not satanic. And she just got so ticked off. But it was really cool because here we are, 17, 18 years old, and being accused of something, and we actually have an adult standing up for us. So that was really cool. And I'm not sure what Pastor Johnson's doing nowadays, but I still remember that 30 years later, 35 years later, something like that. One last thing. She lived right across the street from a park, and that was one thing that she complained about. She actually called the police on it, and there was nothing found. But she said that in the middle of winter, somebody had a bonfire in the middle of the park, and there was a whole bunch of naked people dancing around this bonfire in the middle of winter in Nebraska. It's cold. Bonfire is not going to heat you up. So, ladies just nuts. So, even though ritual satanic killings were found to be false, and that didn't mean that people didn't kill in the name of Satan. Some of these people, Sean Sellers, in 1985, he killed his parents and a convenience store clerk and stated that he did it for a demon called Izorat, saying that he did this to get closer to Satan. And at his execution, he actually said some speech about being closer to the devil and all this stuff. And in this next part, I'm going to butcher names because they're weird names. But in 1995, Krista Pike, Tadryl, Tadarl, Tadryl, Ship, and Shadola Peterson killed Colleen Slemmer. They carved pentagrams into her body and they smashed her head. Pike actually kept a piece of her skull to show classmates. And they said that they did this all for Satan. I'd say getting more famous, we'd have Richard Ramirez, who was the Night Stalker. And he said that he was killing people for Satan. He even drew pentagrams on some of his victims. And of course, the most famous I would consider would be that of the Charles Manson's killing crew, the killing of Sharon Tate. During that killing, Charles Watson told one of Tate's house guests that he was the devil and he's here to do devil's business. You know, I have so many different true crime things that I want to do, and sometimes things trigger me. And what really triggered me to do this was a pamphlet book that I found online called Satanic Cult Awareness by Galen Hurst and Robert Marsh. Let me pull the book up. What's funny, I mean, this book was done in 1993. So after the FBI already had stated, that it was not feasible. But this goes through and talks about the cult techniques of psychological manipulation with isolation, hypnosis, peer group pressure, love bombing, and so on and so forth. I mean, they have a long list. And then they have deceptive recruitment and talks about how they recruit people. And the initiation of new cult members, mental pause about how the mentality of the person is affected by joining the cult. Types of abuse and torture, because I'm thinking that the writers of this might have been in a cult themselves. Then they talked about the teachings of the Church of Satan, ethnic practices. I mean, it's funny. It's sad. But it's also funny that they just went so in depth into this. Then it says identity of groups that share the same ideas as a satanic cult. Christian Defense League, the KKK, Church of Jesus Christ, Christian California, Our Savior's Church, the Burning Bush. I mean, there are the Minutemen. They have a list of 75 different organizations that apparently share the same ideas as the Church of Satan, according to them. Then they talk about the different Sabbath days. Let's see, today's the 3rd. There's nothing on the February 3rd. But February 2nd, there is a Sabbath day for Church of Satan. Talks about the masses and rituals. Then it talks about the different colors, like black is darkness, night, sorrow. Red is blood, physical living, energy. Green, yellow, white, red. Then certain dates. Oh gosh, this is long. Talks about the rituals. I mean, you can find this up. I mean, you can look this up and see it for yourself. Then it talks about different symbols and occult-related homicide clues, where the body's located, position of the body. These are all clues that it's a satanic was a satanic crime. I mean, gosh, they had 32 different clues to say if it's a satanic crime. And then, of course, they have all the symbols and AC/DC, Ozzy, Kiss. It's just ridiculous. Sorry I droned on and on about that. I hate misinformation. Because misinformation ruins everything. It does more harm than good. I mean, if you look at our society now, how many millions of Americans are messed up because of misinformation? I mean, I've personally unfriended people because of it. Because they're spouting out this crap that's not real. Especially when it takes a Google search to find the actual reality of it all. Yeah, I got a little off topic on that. I'm sorry. But, even though there are crimes done with the Satanic Church or with Satan in mind, there's never been, the only religious thing I can think of, besides Jonestown or Heaven's Gate. But that was like mass suicides. That wasn't killing for Satan. So, I'm going to try to keep getting these out. Sorry that I'm very haphazardly doing it, but I'll get more out. And I do really appreciate the new subscribers that I've gotten. Remember, 500 and 1,000. Those are the big numbers to hit. So, sorry that Hazel was not here to greet anyone. So, see you next time. Peace.